Hello, everyone, and welcome into another X's and Dogs podcast. Now, I wanted to start today's show with kind of an interesting question to raise to you guys. It's not only about the Browns, but it's kind of about the Cleveland sports world as a whole here, incorporating the Cavs into the conversation a little bit. And the question is the Cavs season more disappointing than the Browns season so far? Now, that might sound crazy on the surface, but here's the reality of the situation. The Cavs are currently sitting in 9th place in the Eastern Conference standings. I believe they're 15-13. And, you know, I guess from a broad view, that doesn't sound horrible. But whenever you take into consideration, this was a season that the Cavs were supposed to compete for the Eastern Conference championship and, you know, represent the Eastern Conference in the finals in a year that Jason Tatum's not playing, Tyrese Halliburton's not playing. There's no real team in the East that has, you know, made themselves the true favorite. I think the Cavs were the favorites still to win the East until last week. So I think whenever you take all of that into consideration, and also obviously knowing that the Browns had pretty much no expectations to win any games going into the year, apart from just Browns bias and always having hope as a Browns fan, there was no real hope or no real belief that the team was going to win a lot of games this year. So I think I'd honestly have to answer that question saying that the Cavs season is more disappointing. As crazy as that sounds for a Browns team that's 3-11 with pretty much no intentions to win any games the rest of the year, I think they'll finish 3-14. The Cavs have been just super disappointing as a whole, and there's a whole conversation to get into with that one, which I will not talk about today. This is not a Cavs podcast, but I just, you know, as Cleveland sports fans, I know most of us support all the teams, so I wanted to kind of raise that fun, not so fun, I guess, but rather interesting question to you guys to start today's podcast. You know, as we enter the week 16 matchup against the Bills here, and I'll talk about it later on. I'm not going to get into the Bills game itself too much, and kind of, you know, most of the time I go into keys to win the game, you know, how we can attack their defense, how our defense can attack their offense, and kind of getting more into specifics with the game. But I'm not going to do that. I'm at the point in the season where I don't want the Browns to win. Like, they need to lose out, and that's something else I'm going to talk about later on today. So knowing that, I just don't see the point in really spending much time talking about getting into the details of this Bills game. I'll briefly give you my thoughts on it at the end, but I have some other interesting things to talk about today, and I want to shift to the first topic, which, you know, most of the time I don't like to get into the news going on, particularly involving other Browns, you know, radio shows, talk shows, etc. I like to kind of create my own agenda with things to talk about, but I just found that there was a widely discussed, widely popular kind of debate going on in the Browns social media world that stemmed from, frankly, it stemmed from a UCSS clip, and I want to preface by saying I think the UCSS is fantastic. I think they do a great job covering all Cleveland sports teams. I love all the people on there. I think they're all obviously really knowledgeable and have been doing it for so long. But, you know, some of the takes the characters will have on there are just kind of outlandish at times. And there was a clip that surfaced. Kind of one of the people on the show, well, I guess a couple of people on the show had the take that the Cleveland Browns need to have this perfection around the offensive roster before they should go out and draft a quarterback. You know, I guess built into that point, the main idea is that they are not ready to draft a quarterback in the 2026 draft, because they need to draft a tackle, a wide receiver, they need to have this perfect offense around the quarterback. And I don't want to make that sound like I'm saying it's a crazy, ridiculous idea, because there really are a large portion of Browns fans who believe that idea. And that's become very apparent to me over the last couple of days since this video surfaced and there was a ton of conversation about it. There really is a large portion of you guys who believe that idea, and I don't want to poo-poo on it just because I disagree with it. So I understand the premise of the point where you don't want to put a rookie quarterback into a situation where they have no chance to succeed. Now, the way I look at it is, you can point to all these rookie quarterbacks, Cam Ward, Bryce Young had troubles, all the Jets guys that have had troubles over the years, and just these collection of quarterbacks that get thrown into bad situations and don't succeed. Now, I understand that, but for me, I think there's just a greater correlation with the quarterback maybe just not being as ready to play in the NFL, skilled, or maybe just not as good as the guys who do have that immediate success in the NFL. And I want to point out a few scenarios where the team was terrible the year before they drafted a quarterback. They drafted a quarterback and then were immediately better. And each one of these scenarios happened within the past 2 or 3 years. So I bring up these situations just to kind of bring up the opposing viewpoint that a lot of people have a hard time understanding, because this is a pretty controversial topic. It's a big decision. The Browns need to decide if they want to draft the quarterback this in the 2026 draft. So there needs to be a strong case made for both sides of that, argument. And obviously for me, I lie on the view that the quarterback really elevates the offense. Like, the quarterback comes in, and the best quarterbacks in the league don't need a perfect offensive line. They don't need a perfect run game, and they don't need, 2 wide receiver ones. They don't need Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. And I mean, they don't need Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Like, they're able to elevate the guys that are on the team. And I want to start with the Houston Texans. So the year before the Texans drafted C.J. Stroud, keep in mind they were terrible that year. That was the year that that was the first year Deshaun was playing for the Browns. That was the year we went into Houston. Deshaun played a horrific game, and we beat them easily. They never even had a chance in that game. I honestly don't remember who was starting at quarterback for them, but they were horrible. Like, their offense was terrible. They had no chance in that one. I remember how bad that team was. And then the Texans had the draft where they took C.J. Stroud. They also took Will Anderson. So I understand that there was more talent added to that roster. But C.J. Stroud went in there and immediately made that offense, way above average in the first year. You can't tell me that offensive roster was that quickly turned around to be fantastic. I think there's much more truth in the fact that CJ Stroud was just elevating, just immediately elevated that Houston Texans offense as soon as he entered the door. And that leads me to the next team, the Washington Commanders. The year before they got Jaden Daniels, this was a team that was 4-13. And I don't know if I said that the Texans record, but they were 3-13-1. So they were a 3-win team, which to you guys should sound familiar to you guys because we were a 3-win team last year. We're probably going to be a 3-win team this year. That's an important note. The Commanders, though, were 4-13 before Jaden Daniels. That team was also terrible. Jaden Daniels comes in. They go to the NFC Championship game immediately. Now, I know that they kind of revamped that offense a little bit, but Jaden Daniels came in and just just elevated everybody. It's a common occurrence. Then New England, the next point I want to make. Now, New England's a little bit different because the year before they drafted Drake May, they were 4-13, so they were a terrible team. Now, last year they were also pretty bad, but the thing is, Drake May didn't play till like past halfway through the year, and at that point, I think the season's kind of just the way it is. The culture, who was their coach? Gerard Mayo, I think, and that culture was just terrible there. He got fired after a year, and it was hard for Drake May to really make his impact in his rookie season. But then immediately the year after here, they're competing and probably, they have a really good chance to win that division. I think they have a chance to make a run in the playoffs, and they turned it around like that. So I think all three of these scenarios they really just show you what a quarterback can do for an offense. And I don't want to make it sound like you're able to just put a quarterback into an offense and without any other work whatsoever, without any other additions or fixing things, you're able to just immediately become a playoff team. That's not the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is it starts with the quarterback. You can, in reality, you can go out there and fix the offensive line all you want. You can add in all these wide receivers, do this, that, and the other to make the offense better and just avoid taking that quarterback. But things get even more tricky at that point because let's say your offense does get better next year. You don't have the quarterback. You decide to pass on the quarterback. Your offense gets better. Now you're in a position the year after where you probably won too many games to go out there and draft the franchise-changing quarterback. So you're kind of stuck in this purgatory that we see the Steelers in always. There's teams that are in this bracket of even like the Seahawks are kind of like that. Although they have been really good this year. There's just teams that get caught in that purgatory of just being mediocre, and they don't have the franchise-changing quarterback. So the bigger idea there is that you take the quarterback whenever you have the opportunity to do that, because I'm a firm believer in the fact that a quarterback is going to be good if they're good. Like if they are a franchise changing quarterback, they're going to be a franchise changing quarterback. Josh Allen went on to into a Bills franchise that was the same as the Browns. They had no success whatsoever in decades. Josh Allen was just a franchise-changing quarterback. That's just the way he was. Joe Burrow is the same thing with the Bengals. These guys are just franchise-changing quarterbacks. That's what they're going to be. I'm a firm believer of if the quarterback is good enough, they're going to be good regardless. They'll figure it out. The first year may not be as good as you'd hope it to be. For example, Drake May, but they will figure it out if they have the ability to do so. That's the way I view the situation. And that's why I am in full support of taking a quarterback this draft. I don't think we have to surround him with, a fantastic offensive line. Does it need to be better than this year? Ideally, yes. Like, ideally, we can make it better than the worst, one of the worst offensive lines in the league. And ideally, we can have better than the worst receiving core in the league. That's up to the general manager. I don't think you need to exhaust your top pick in the draft to do that. I think you can use free agency and you can use the second round pick, third round pick, fourth round pick to elevate that part of the roster. But you can't use those picks to adequately fix the quarterback position like you can, with that top 5 pick. And that's the way I view the situation. It's still going to take getting, in my opinion, getting a new offensive coach in there, getting rid of Stefanski, revamping the entire scheme, just making things more 2026 NFL level, like a fresh offense that's innovative and uses a ton of motion, attacks teams' weaknesses rather than just sticking to their roots and I think that does need to happen as well. So like if we draft a quarterback and we're still running the same offense that we're running, there's a chance it's not going to work. But again, you don't need to use that first pick on a coach. You can get the new coach and draft the quarterback in the same year. So again, I know it's a controversial topic right now, and there are people who believe both sides. So I don't want to make one side sound like it's the 100% correct way to do it, but I just wanted to give you guys my rationale into why I think that it doesn't take a perfect offense to incorporate a rookie quarterback, and have success. All right, that's enough on that. I'm sure you guys will let me know what you think in the comments for that one. But the next thing I want to talk about is Quinshon Judkins. There's been some discussion between the struggles that Quinshon's had and kind of also at the same time TreVeyon Henderson's obviously having a really good second half of the season for the Patriots. Like, he's really found his role there. He's found his footing in the NFL, and I always thought he would be able to do that because he's a really good player. He's really athletic. I don't think that relates to Quinshon Judkins at all, and I don't think it's fair to kind of compare them just because they played on the same college team. That said, I want to make the point that Quinshon Judkins, although, you can look at his stats here, and on the surface, 3.63 yards per carry. That ranks 90th in the NFL. Like, that's not good. We know that yards per carry are not only a running back stat. Do they play a role? Of course they do. They're the ones carrying the ball. Does the offensive line play a role? Absolutely it does. And that's the point I'm making here. Quinshon has 105 total rushing yards. This is where things get crazy to me. 805 total rushing yards. 660 of those yards are after contact. So, we're looking at 145 yards before getting contacted. And I think he has over 200 total carries. So if you just do the math on that, like, he's constantly getting contacted either behind the line of scrimmage or before he gets 1 yard down the field. Now, that is just telltale of an offensive line that is not able to create any sort of separation, create any run lanes, get any push. And I think if you just look at Quinshon's stats and see the yards per carry and see the total number of yards, you wouldn't have a good enough idea of how good of a player he's been for the Browns this year. And if you really just watch the football games being played, you can tell whenever he has an opportunity or even the slightest space to run, he's effective. Like, we've seen big plays every single time he has the chance to make them. But his yards per carry constantly gets dinged because he's getting tackled behind the line of scrimmage. Guys aren't being touched by our line. And it's just ugly all around. It hasn't been good whenever you're looking at it from the run blocking perspective. So I just wanted to kill that idea of Quinshon Judkins is having a bad year or he's a bust and he's, we should have went somewhere else with that pick, which I've heard a little bit. And I think those things will probably grow because I don't think this run game is going to get any better this year. So I think those ideas will become louder and louder into the offseason with Quinshon, and I'm going to be someone who constantly pushes back on that and just, puts it into perspective that this is a guy who is getting absolutely zero help whatsoever from his offensive line. At times, it looks like they might as well not even be on the field whenever he's trying to run the ball. So Judkins is going to be fine. He's going to be a good player for us. We do obviously have to fix the offensive line. And, that's step one with the run game, because I don't think Judkins or Sampson are really the problem. I think, if you put a good offensive line in front of them, I think we could have a real dangerous backfield with those two guys for the next 5 years. Like, they're both really talented and they've shown flashes this season, which is impressive just based on the lack of talent on that line. All right. Now I want to discuss for me, this is the most important part of the rest of the season here. Now, I will say, a couple weeks ago, I wouldn't have said this. And I'm someone who, on this podcast, on this show, I frequently talk about that I don't believe actively tanking and actively trying to lose games does anybody any good in the NFL. It doesn't usually work. Now, I've been pretty clear that there is an extent to that statement. And for me, I have reached the extent. We are at the point here where this team needs a quarterback. Like, I know a lot of people still believe in Shedeur, and I've had extensive conversations about that this week. So if you want to hear my takes on the Shedeur situation, before killing me in the comments saying that we need a quarterback, just I urge you to go and watch those podcasts, before you kill me in the comments here. But for today's sake, I'm just going to say I believe this team needs a quarterback, and they need a quarterback more than they need to win any of these 3 remaining games. So that said, the Browns haven't done many things successful this season. They haven't won games. They've developed their rookies decently. Their coaching staff has not been successful. I think a lot of the free agents that have come in haven't been successful. Like, most of the metrics that you would look at in a successful football team, the Browns have not lived up to that. But here's where this is the part of the season where this Browns team needs to be successful. And it's actually completely inverse of having any real success. They need to lose every single game. They need to have a successful tank for the remainder of the season. I don't care if it takes Jimmy Haslam phoning down to Kevin Stefanski and saying, don't even play the starters today. Make it obvious. To me, it doesn't matter. You need to lose every single game. I think the next 2 will take care of themselves. Like, I think the Bills and the Steelers are fighting for a playoff spot. They have so much to play for that they're gonna beat us by probably 15 plus points anyway. So I'm not really worried about those. The game that scares me is the Bengals game, because while the Bengals have said that Joe Burrow wants to play in the remainder of the season, it really is not going to make much sense at all for him to be playing in that last game. And I just have this fear that Shedeur will have like a career day, week 18 pointless game where we're playing the Bengals backups. And Shedeur goes out there and throws for 350 yards and 3 touchdowns, and we win the game and just ruin our draft stock. Like, that's the one thing that will make me so upset whenever we're looking at the rest of the season. There's nothing else that could really make me too mad apart from if Myles Garrett gets snubbed from the depoy, which that's not going to happen, or if he doesn't break the sack record, that'll be disappointing. But to me, the thing that will make me the most upset is if this Browns team, who has been horrible all season, decides to win one of these pointless games. They cannot do that. They have to. I don't care what it takes. Do what you have to do. Lose the games. Get yourself the quarterback. And even if you don't want a quarterback, even if you don't agree with me that we should draft a quarterback, it very much behooves this Browns team to get the highest draft pick possible, because there are a ton of teams that want a quarterback. So let's say we get the 2nd pick and, you think we don't need to draft a quarterback. Shedeur is good enough. I'm not sure how you come to that conclusion at this point, but you're there. We can trade that pick to the Jets, the Cardinals, the Dolphins, the Rams, I'm sure I'm forgetting other teams, like the Raiders if they're not ahead of us. There's going to be a collection of teams that are willing to trade capital, I guarantee it, to go out there and get one of these quarterbacks coming out. And so we can just build our draft capital up in that way, and continue to build our team. For me, I'd rather just draft the quarterback, but I think both sides of that argument that we talked about earlier in today's podcast very much benefit from losing out and getting a higher draft pick. So that's where I am on the rest of the season, and it's also part of the reason why I have no interest in really breaking down these games too much. Like, we'll talk about the rookies and how they play and how the young guys are kind of coming along here, because these are good development games for the younger players. You know, it still is not meaningful. It still is football. They're playing in the NFL. They're playing against teams that want to win, and it's important. It's still important times for, you know, growing these young players in their careers. So apart from that, though, there's really not much to learn from these games, and they just need to lose them. So hopefully we're all in the same board there, or in the same boat there. We all kind of agree on that. That can maybe be some common ground between the quarterback versus non-quarterback controversy that's going to probably just get, you know, hotter and hotter as the offseason kind of builds up and we start to understand actually where the Browns are going to be picking specifically. And, you know, we see these quarterbacks actually start to go through their pro days, you know, and senior bowls and playoffs and just a whole bunch more information on the whole entire situation. That being said, we can briefly talk about the Bills game here. The Bills are coming into Cleveland being 10.5 point favorites. I will say there's almost definitely going to be more Bills fans there than Browns fans, which, like, we've reached that point in the season where it's funny that the Browns are playing the Bills and the Steelers, because I think those are the two teams that will travel the best to Cleveland. Conveniently, we're playing those two teams at this part of the season where, like, nobody's going to the game apart from those fan bases who want to see their teams fight for their playoff spots or win their division, etc. And the tickets will be, I'm sure, significantly cheaper at the Brown Stadium than their respective stadiums. So, like, knowing that, yeah, there's going to be a ton of Bills fans. There's going to be a ton of Steelers fans next week. So I don't really, I think this is more of like a neutral game where it's not like the Bills are not really, they only have to travel a couple hours. There's going to be a ton of fans there. They're used to the cold weather. And to me, the 10.5 number is too low. I would 100% bet the Bills to cover that. You know, we got absolutely boat raced by Chicago, and I think the Bills are even better than Chicago, and they're rounding into some pretty good form here at this part of the season. So yeah, I think the Bills will cover that one. You know, I mean, the Bills defense isn't great. They've played a little bit better as of late, but I think they're still somewhere in the 20s as far as like defensive rankings go, looking at just, you know, all the advanced defensive metrics. But to me, that doesn't really matter. We said the same thing about the Bears last week, and we scored 3 points and got like 11 first downs total. So it doesn't really matter how bad that defense is. This Browns offense is capable of making them look good, and the Bills offense is obviously really good. They have Josh Allen. That's all you need to know. And to be honest, that's all I really have on that on the game this weekend. We'll talk about it a little bit in the post-game show, which will come out to you guys just in podcast format because I'm traveling to Florida for the holidays. So I won't have kind of the setup as far as recording, like the video format. But still, I'm going to try to have kind of my portable podcast equipment there for me to talk about the game. I'm not sure as far as like how many podcasts I'll have out next week for you guys, but we'll see kind of how the week goes and some of the news that comes out, if it's worth making some more. But definitely we'll have a post-game show out for you guys to talk about it. But honestly, that's all I have for today. You know, hopefully you guys all have a great weekend. You know, finish up with your holiday shopping, get ready for Christmas, New Year's. You know, happy Hanukkah to those of you who celebrate, and hopefully everyone is, you know, enjoying the start of their holiday season here. Spend some time with some family, relax before the new year. all that said, hopefully you guys have a great rest of your day. Hopefully you enjoyed today's podcast. If you did, leave a like on the respective platform. I will see you all very soon. Bye-bye.